right, good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Day 9. So we're going to get right into the technique today. Just before that, I wanted to sort of share a couple things to help you interact with your process. One is that it's nice to think that meditation is a journey, and I think it's fairly normal and easy to feel that because you're in a different place mentally or emotionally than you are at the end than you are at the beginning. But that sort of mental or psychological transition hinges on physical change. And so a really practical way, a concrete way of sort of quantifying our capacity to make a powerful journey is by appreciating the physicality of what you're doing. And that mental shift hinges on physical change as well. And so the point being, the more physical change you can create in your internal environment, the greater or more intense the experience of that new position within your mind. And so you're trying to create as much CO2, you're trying to collect as much CO2 as you possibly can through this technique, which means that you really want to push yourself. And Kumbhaka is unique. It's sort of intense, almost violent in terms of the sensation and experience, but not all techniques, sort of disclaimer, not all techniques are as intense or like strong as Kumbhaka, but we're practicing Kumbhaka. So the more physical change you can create in your internal environment, the greater the sense of a journey at the end of the practice. And the second point, following that is Kumbhaka itself, at least within my mind and my interpretation of meditation, Kumbhaka itself is not necessarily meditation. Kumbhaka is meditative as all things can be meditative. Meditation is that point where you're essentially doing nothing. You're just sitting there, the breath is breathing by itself, the body is just not moving, it's holding its own stillness, the world is operating or governing itself, and you're just sort of reclining in this experience of being an observer. And it's at that point where essentially all physical dimensions of your being and life are allowed and permitted to operate through their own will, that you get this really unique perspective of existence and your own being. And so that's sort of the meditative state. To reduce it into simple terms, meditation is the absence of effort. And so Kumbhaka is certainly effort, your posture is certainly effort, your focus is certainly effort. So they can only be meditative, and it is the absence of unconsciousness. And so pure open awareness, that's meditation, and we are attempting to touch that once we release the techniques and we're just sort of sitting, savoring the results of our time holding our breath and collecting CO2. So that little moment, the end of our practice, I find personally is an opportune time to become intimate with the philosophies of yoga and the philosophies of meditation. Each Sanskrit word, there are sort of like power words within Sanskrit. Each Sanskrit word is sort of this concocted epiphany laced into syllables, laced into phonetic sounds. And I think a really beautiful word to sort of commit to for the duration of this challenge is KAIVALYA. KAIVALYA is K-A-I-V-A-L-Y-A, KAIVALYA. And it means aloneness. It means that as together as we are, as integrated as we are into the world, into each other, into society, into nature, we are also very obviously separate, and we are all living through an experience that we can't share even with our most, intimate of relationships, our family, our lovers, our friends. There is a huge portion of our being that is sacred only to us. And when you can sit in that sacredness, in that aloneness, in that solitude, and embrace it as something like a temple, something like a sanctuary, you sort of bypass, you bypass a lot of strife that I think people at a certain point in their lives will sort of, come into contact with, this fear or this desperation to not be alone. Aloneness is a virtue. It's a gift in the yogic and meditative mind. And we can leverage it by adopting this philosophy and sort of divinizing it just by using a Sanskrit word to sort of rebuild the relationship or rename it. So KAIVALYA. So we'll do what we did yesterday, a 1 to 1.5, 1 to 1.5 ratio. You'll build all that CO2, and just remember, the more physical change I can create in my body, the greater my meditative journey. I will be somewhere else, and that somewhere else will be further away from what is normal otherwise. And then once we're done with the technique, you're going to sit there, you're just going to feel open awareness, the absence of effort, the absence of unconsciousness, and from time to time, you're going to appreciate that underneath all of that thinking, underneath all of that meditating, there is KAIVALYA. You are alone, and that's beautiful and sacred. Groovy, cool. Good to see you all. Day 9, let's do this. KUMBHAKA, breath retention. Alrighty, powerful seated position. So not comfortable seated position. Comfortable is nice. Powerful seated position. Hips tilt forward, spine is tall. Your torso is governed and supported by the hips. Wrists resting on knees, nice straight arms. Spread your fingers wide for a moment. Really spread the fingers. And lock in to the tingling and buzzing sensation in your fingertips. Tuck your chin in slightly to decompress the base of the skull. And if you have the tendency to fidget or move or sort of like scratch your face, aim to resist that now. Lock onto that tingling and buzzing. And so this tingling and buzzing is called sukshma. We mentioned it yesterday. If you can feel this tingling, buzzing sensation in the fires of your retention, if you can taste it in the suffocation, then the suffocation won't be so grueling. Start to deepen the breath in, deepen the breath out, and find your natural baseline. Breathe into the belly, swell into the rib cage. Notice the bottom half of the rib cage is more flexible than the upper half. Try to breathe into the collarbone. And take about 3 to 5 breaths, just warming up these muscles. And so what we're trying to do now is immediately expand upon our baseline. Again, meditation is a mental journey. The aim is to get you to a certain place within your mind. And that transition is correlated to physical change. If you can deepen your breath, that is physical change. It changes the nature of your awareness. If you can hold your breath for longer and longer periods of time, that is physical change. It will change the nature of your awareness. All right, so hopefully you have this new baseline a couple seconds longer. Now build your ratios from there. Let's engage KUMBHAKA. Inhale baseline, hold for 1.5. Exhale baseline, hold for 1.5. This is all about collecting CO2 and building acidity. So when you're holding your breath, when your lungs are full, be sure to push the belly out. That physical action is going to create more carbonic acid, making the technique difficult, creating more physical change. And when you exhale and hold your breath, again, pull the belly in, use those muscles, generate more carbonic acid, more acidity, more physical change. And last time, by the end of all of that effort, all of that tapasya, Sanskrit term, you will be somewhere else. Remember simultaneity. Even while you're experiencing the distress of breath retention, you can experience a peace. It's all happening at the same time if you step back far enough into yourself. In the same way that the earth, split between sunlight and shadow, can be seen at once if we pull our vantage point back. Relax your muscles. Focus on that tingling and buzzing sensation. Inhale, hold, push the belly out. The more physical change, the better. Exhale, hold, pull the belly in. Add 1 or 2 counts to your retentions only. Just a couple rounds doing this, pushing the envelope. Focus on the tingling sensation. You can feel stress and tranquility at once. Just feel. Let it overcome you. Okay, breathe normally. Meditation now, the absence of effort. Your lungs are breathing on their own, your body is just staying still by itself. The absence of unconsciousness. Let your mind wander and expand, inside and outside, past, present, and future. Everything is valid. You're only observing everything. Slow down your breath and sense this inexplicable solitude. Acknowledge the truth that in fact you are alone. Not bad, but inescapable. And if you are open to it, it paves the way to sacredness, the experience of individuality, the experience of your identity. Your personal sliver of consciousness is sacred, unshareable, and only yours. Bring your hands to heart center, rebuilding your posture. Consider this is the peak of your practice. Hips tilt forward, spine lengthens. Identify that boost in confidence and presence that comes from your sympathetic nervous system. Slow down your breath. As always, the game of this final moment, testing sentience, boosting sincerity. And with that flood of sincerity, KAIVALYA. Appreciate your solitude. Appreciate your independence. Appreciate the sacredness of being an individual. Thumb knuckles to third eye center. Feel your thumbs touching the skin of your forehead, back to technique. Hone into this tingling and buzzing sensation. Pressure on the skin. Nerve impulses moving through nerves. Observe that it feels good. It is the footprint of aliveness, of a functioning organism. This sensation is sukshma. It is what to yogis all sensory experience boils down to. The biological blips of electricity moving through nerves into the brain and consciousness. Focus so intensely on this little pinprick of sensation that other parts of the body blur out. The more intense your focus, the more obvious the awareness that is observing this sensation. The more obvious this awareness, the easier it is to embrace KAIVALYA. This awareness is the epicenter of that aloneness. And from this profound individuality, it becomes easier to recognize totality. When we embrace KAIVALYA, when we can feel KAIVALYA, we afford ourselves a one-on-one with the other, with the world, with existence, and two yogis, with God. Release your wrists to your knees, random finger to each thumb. And with your next inhale, open your eyes. Just repeating KAIVALYA in your mind. Only I can see through my eyes. Only I can hear through my ears. Only I can feel through my body.